Tell me why when I saw Reset the series, I was like, I've seen this story before and I love it. Hi friends! I'm so excited for today's video because it's gonna be all about revenge drama because we have Marry My Husband and Reset, two on the surface definitely a little bit different stories, but the theme and the genre definitely very similar, and of course also with the necessary happy ending. So I'm so excited for you to all see it. Yes, so let's go. Let's start with the synopsis, the plot of both of the series. So if you have not watched either of the series or one of them, there's definitely going to be spoilers. Just to be safe, I wanted to say that. Okay, let's start with the plot of Marry My Husband, which is basically, it starts with a younger woman. She's called Giwan and she's married and she has cancer. She's in cancer treatment and it's not going that well. And so, already for her, she's like not doing well physically, mentally, and so on. Then she finds out that her husband, who's already not paying for her cancer treatment, which is why she has to leave the hospital, then she finds out he has an affair with her best friend and that he wants her to die so he can collect the life insurance money and basically gets killed by them, which is a very sad start. But then she wakes up again and she is back 10 years before that. So she does not have cancer, she's not married, but she does know that her best friend and her husband are gonna scheme together, get together and try to kill her and then actually kill her. So she's like, this is like crazy, right? So it's a revenge drama. She has a second chance to change things, but she also has the knowledge of the future of different things, such as which stocks are going to do well, what's going to happen in the company, which people to look out for, and of course what happened to her in her body, like the cancer, and then also with what happened with her husband and her best friend. And so I love that. Side note, I also read then this article about how women in like relationships, but especially stressful and toxic relationships, have more often like autoimmune issues, disease and things like that. But also they can get better or like completely disappear on some parts, not autoimmune disease, but some other things, which are like health issues caused by stress, for example. So I was like, that's kind of crazy, but fitting to what we're talking about. Then we have Reset, which is kind of like a similar vibe. Like he's like, he's on the height of his career. Like he's doing really well. He has this massive house. He's super successful, super rich. He has a boyfriend, a best friend. It's all going pretty well. Like he has had to leave some people behind in life because sometimes that's how fame works, I guess. And so he wins this big award and everyone is like, oh my God, like you need to come to the party. They have this massive party, but then he has this award and the flowers and he wants to go like upstairs to his room, basically to his, bedroom. That's where he sees and hears that his boyfriend, slash maybe even fiance and his best friend, they're having an affair and they're saying like really horrible things, and he storms in and he's like really angry and they are trying to placate him. But he's also not feeling really well. Like he's like kind of like stumbling about, even though he had only one glass of champagne. And so he falls off the railing and dies and then wakes up. And it's also like, I think 20 years or so. It's like the late 90s. When he wakes up again, he's like a young man, an undiscovered actor. So he also wants to change his life and he wants to still become an actor, but not do the same mistakes, like trusting the wrong people, getting together with his boyfriend from back then, basically, trusting the wrong people, alienating his best friend, not being there for his best friend's mom and things like that. And so, yeah, he meets, and of course, Tada, like this at first kind of mysterious rich guy. And so that's why I feel like, again, that's a really like, it's gonna, like, you will see the similarities definitely. But then when you already listen to the plot, I think you can already see the similarities definitely, Okay, let's talk about Giwan and Armen, who are obviously our main characters in both Marry My Husband and Reset. And they're both like really like quite like very nice, but also very sensitive people, who don't who trusted all the wrong people, who are a little bit also people pleasers maybe, you know, and like some narcissistic people, like, you know, people who want to leech onto them, like took advantage of them, and so their life kind of derailed basically in a way that they didn't want to, but at some point it was hard to, you know, go back again, especially also with Armen, because I think like when there's fame, it's even a more different beast than it was in Marry My Husband, where they were just like normal people. But I feel like if it's like fame, there's like a different level. It like does something to you and all the people around you. And I always love that when celebrities can kind of like scale up back a bit and still try to be like a more normal person. Like for example, like Cillian Murphy or someone like that. Like I always admire that if they like try to still be like empathetic and like interesting and like not completely like, you know, annoying and selfish and things like that. So that's why I feel like that's very interesting, because even though both of them do have very different lives, the storylines, as you can see how we're first presented but then also literally reset in both instances, is very similar, because they both wake up in a work environment and they're like immediately disoriented, but also I'm like, oh my god, like I don't want to see those people who were part in what was happening to me, or who influenced me badly, who were bad to me, or even who led to my death, right? And so, but then we can already see within the first episode of both of them, they also meet other people that either they didn't pay attention to it in the past, like for example with Giwan, she didn't really pay attention to her boss, Ji-hyuk, or to his sister, who then becomes her best friend. And actually is a really nice, beautiful and adorable person, and we love her. Same with Armen. He like also contented himself with all the wrong people and then neglected his actual best friend, and then which led then even to the death of the mom of his best friend. And then, of course, he also meets Tada, who we then learn have an even greater love stories in some aspects and backstory than Ji-hyuk and Giwan in Marry My Husband. Even though they also have this really good backstory, but I feel like Armin and him goes even further back when they're like young, really young, like they're like children basically, or like young, like teens and young adults and all of that stuff. So I love that. But there again, you can see that they're both there in different stages of their lives. Like for example, in Ji-hyuk, Gi-wan, they meet when they're both like young university students, and Ji-hyuk even then takes home the cat that both of them would feed, the stray cat. And obviously with Armin and Tada, they meet several times on that bridge. And one time even, like they're both times that they meet when they don't know each other that well yet, they, you know, prevent each other from committing suicide or harming themselves. So that's why I think it's like very similar kind of like first meeting, kind of meet cute, I guess. Not really with Armin and Tada, the first one, but you know what I mean. Like the first meeting is also very similar. And so you can also see that Armin, same with Giwan, he like really deeply cares about himself, but also about others. He's a people pleaser. He really wants to do well, but he also doesn't want to alienate people. And then there's these, like basically same with Giwan, there's these things where they're thinking things, and sometimes even it's visualized, where they're like really angry at the people that they know are going to harm them in the future. For example, with Giwan, with then her future ex-boyfriend and her future ex-best friend, for example, and or like some of the people also in the office, like her superior, probably like this one guy, for example, or same with Armin, like some of the other actors, or his future ex-boyfriend and future ex-best friend as well. And so I feel like that's it really mirrors each other really well. And then of course they also go back quite far, because she goes 10 years, he goes like 20 years, I think. Yeah, so I think that's also really interesting, because there's some other ones, especially K-dramas, where they do like this revenge storyline where the person dies and then comes back. But I feel like these ones are like, they're very similar because they also go back quite far, which is very interesting, especially in Reset, but also in Giwan, at both times, that they go back very far from having been in this very technology, social media, advanced age, to going back to like a bit more of an analog time, or like a less time. Like, for example, she goes back to 2013, and the reason why she and Giwan and Jihook find out that each other are the people from the future but in the past is because of BTS, because they both are talking about BTS songs which have not come out, because it's 2013, there's only one album, is their debut album, and so songs like Spring Day and Dynamite have not been released, because Spring Day I think comes out in like 2017, Dynamite in 2020, so like none of that has happened. They probably even haven't written those songs, they haven't even been conceived basically, and so that's why they find out that they're like from the future. And in Armen's case, he's a bit more blunt about it. Like, he literally tells Tada about all these things. For example, later on, when they're like, when they're like already together and they're at this like conference like thing, and there's people like talking about things that they want to produce, and Armen tells him basically, yeah, you need to invest in social media, you need to invest in like more like tech startups, you need to invest in like as in Thailand they call it YCs, so Yaois, so like BL series, that's going to be really big, right? Especially in Thailand, you need to expand also all over the world, because then you can be the front runner for that. Which I think like I would do that too, similar as in Marry My Husband, where she knows how things are going to turn out with certain stocks. Like, obviously she didn't pay attention to all of them, but she knows, for example, Tesla, Facebook, Apple, like that, all these ones are already successful either already because it's 2013, or they are still rising, so it's still at an okay price for her to buy the stock, or even less realistic stocks that she buys, for example, that her ex-boyfriend in the series buys in both timelines basically, and then she like knows that one of them is a scam, and so she kind of goads him, like baits him into selling the good stock and only buying the bad stock, so that he loses all his money, but she makes a lot of money because she invests at the right time frame basically, which I always loved, like having this thought experiment would happen if I also would go back in time. And that's also one of the first things I would do, is I would get a brokerage account and invest in all these different companies. For example, like if you can buy shares in companies like, for example, the record label that has BTS, for example, or also stuff like, you know, Facebook or something. Like, I think I would do that, because it's like, actually, especially in the beginning, if you go back really far, like ever like Armen, where they don't even exist yet, or like with Gi-wan, where they're like still like growing, you know, that is actually not unclever to do that. And especially Giwan also wants to like not be anything connected to her boyfriend and wants to get rid of him, and so, you know, but also Armen, he wants to stop being a struggling actor, so I feel like that's why. I love that there are like so many interesting parallels between the characters. And then there's of course a little bit of a makeover scene as well, which of course Gi-wan is more of a traditional makeover, because literally like a lot, and I love that scene. But Armen also has a little bit, because in the beginning he has kind of shaggy, longer hair, and then it comes a bit styled. And of course, when he and Tada are together, he gets also a lot of clothes and other things, and he sleeps at his place. But I love in the beginning that both of them are like these kind of unnoticeable people, and then because they have confidence in themselves, but also their significant others have confidence in them, they kind of start to bloom basically. Okay, let's talk about the negative influences which led to them both dying and then having to restart, basically reset their lives. That's of course Minhwa in Marry My Husband. I actually forgot this name of the ex-boyfriend now. But it's not that important, I think. He annoyed me from the first second. Minhwa also, because the actor, I love him. He's like so great, like of Minhwa, the actor, because he's also the Quenchana guy, and he's like best friends with Jin from BTS, and I love that. But he is so evil in Marry My Husband. He's like so despicable, so evil. It's giving like red pill. It's giving like the birth rate of Korea is dropping for the right reasons, because who wants to reproduce with that kind of man, you know, which he can't even do that apparently in the show because he's infertile, which just makes the whole storyline with her best friend, ex-best friend, and then the fake pregnancy is just so crazy, because he couldn't even get her pregnant, so that gets me every time. I have to laugh every time. But yeah, with Armen, he also has these undue influences with like these other actors who are out to get him because they're jealous, and like just generally horrible people. And then of course, like he doesn't really have then the support of his best friend anymore and the mom. And yeah, doesn't have Tada because Tada doesn't in his first life basically, doesn't present himself. He's just in the background and like encouraging him and helping him. But then that's why I love in the second life both Ji-hook and Tada like, no, actually, I also, because again, another thing that happens in both shows is that the love interests of the main characters are actually also going back in time, which makes more sense. And but still. And they don't know that. I mean, like I said, they find out during certain parts of the series. And yeah, that's why it's really interesting how they both are like in the background in like the first life basically, and they're like, no, like they already have someone and they're already doing really well, and then it's like too late because they're dead, like Giwan and Armen, and then they both like really regret it and are like basically like, oh, if there's a second chance I would do everything different and I would do all of that. And so I love that both Ji-hook and Tada then both take these steps to actually get to know the people that they're in love with, and because they also know that they could still potentially die if they don't change things. Especially in Marry My Husband, it's this thing that if you don't change enough things and you don't put the fate that you have onto someone else basically, then it will come back to you. Doesn't matter where you run to, which is also a very interesting concept I think in Marry My Husband. In Reset it's a little bit different because in the beginning he's making some of the same mistakes, but he also is trying to change, but he's still giving him the back and forth. So but I think in the end both of them is like, you need to live the life for you, not for anyone else. Like for all of basically the two main characters in Marry My Husband and two main characters in Reset, it means literally living the life for yourself in your best way, in your most authentic way, and just live your life for yourself, not for your family, not for society, not for other people, not to please other people, and just do what you want. Look how you want, act how you want, be the actor that you want to want, be the person that you want to want, and get the person that you want to marry you, and not settle basically or stay with someone who's toxic or cheats on you and so on, right? Or doesn't take care of you when you have cancer. And so that's why I think it's also really interesting, because it is both times it really showed that it's like the male gaze is really not in it, like neither in the K-drama nor in the Thai BL, because it's a very female gaze, because it's like the men are literally a fantasy, because most men don't act like that. Especially also in the K-drama, if you know about like the situation in Korea, it's abysmal, and so that's why the birth rate is climbing further, which you go, Korean women, love that for you. Support that, solidarity to that. And that's why I think this K-drama is also so interesting, because it really shows the insidiousness of the patriarchy, especially in Korea, but in general in a society which is a patriarchal society. It's like, it's not just Giwan and other women who are completely subjugated basically by the patriarchy on certain ways, but it's also like other women who are literally brainwashed. Like for example, Sumin, she thinks that if she if she is basically the person that she is, then that will give her some kind of advantage, and in the end she ends up in prison, so I would not want to be in prison just because of some man, would not do that. But okay, that's why she is in prison, because she killed someone. But yeah, that's why I think it's really interesting, because it's really people close to them, like Gi-wan's best friend and Ji-hook's former fiance, and then with Armen, it's his it's the brother of Tada, or like the stepbrother of Tada, his rivals, but also like his then also shortly his boyfriend, right, ex-boyfriend, which he doesn't get together with in that obviously in the new timeline. But yeah, so I think that's really interesting that most of the time like the antagonists are really close to them, and actually in the first timeline are firstly the cause obviously of their death, but are also people that are so important to them, actually isolating them from other people. So it is definitely very toxic and very like it's giving like they're being gaslit like constantly. Like Giwan is being gaslit by everyone around her basically, because she does not have people in her life to lift her up who say you're actually so cool, you're so interesting, so empathetic, like you're really good at your job, like stuff like that. Like no one does that basically. And so I think it's same with Armen. Like Tada is the only one in his first life who kind of supports him, and so he doesn't really have that, and we don't really know a lot about his background. Like where are his parents? Does he have any siblings? But we can assume that they're either not in the picture or maybe not even alive. And same with Giwan, right? Because both her mother and her father are dead, and so yeah. That's why I think it's like really interesting that they're so close to the people who are their destruction. Okay, now the villains, as we already talked about, are people very close to both Giwan and Armen, and they're also the makers of their own demise, because they could have just stopped at one point. For example, like Armen's like rivals, like friends, they could have just stopped after the first time that he and Tada stopped them. They could have stopped, like left the country normally, but no, they had to involve themselves further, right, and actually like make themselves liable to criminal lawsuit, basically like a lawsuit in criminal court, which I don't know how that works in Thailand, but probably not fun, right, and not good for your reputation, because they were already losing money, advertisement, and acting opportunities. Then we have the stepbrother of Tada, who could also been like, firstly, I don't get it, like probably brainwashed by the mom, but like, why are you so mean to someone that you are saying you actually admire? Maybe like because they're not actually biologically related. Everyone was like, maybe he's even a little bit in love with Tada, but that does not justify being that horrible to a person that's supposed to be part of your family, right? And then also like he could have supported Tada, they could have led the company together, but no, he and the stepmom, they were like, oh no, we are gonna be super horrible to him, basically like a Cinderella vibe a little bit, right? When the father dies, that he's like the unloved child, and then I'm like, why? You could have literally, they're making their own demise. They were literally like fulfilling their own prophecies, that they were saying, oh, you're gonna have this, you're gonna be so bad at this, and then in the end they're the ones, like for example Giwan's friend Sumin is then in prison, and Yura, because of her craziness basically, dies in a car accident, right? And then of course we've got the Minwa, who is also, he dies at the hand of Sumin, because he doesn't understand how, you know, how deranged she is and how far she would go to achieve her goals basically. And similar like in Reset, I think if they would have been stopped at a certain point, for example, before they hurt Armen several times, also like bodily, like physically, that he had to go to the hospital, I think twice, because one time is the one where he gets shot with an actual pistol, and then the thing when he falls off the roof or something, right? And then them trying to poison him, right, in the beginning of, like the beginning in the first timeline, in the beginning of then the second timeline. And so I think that's also really interesting. What this shows is that these people, like these bullies, these antagonists, they're literally creating their own demise, because if they just mind their own business, been empathetic and nice and kind people, it would have gotten either not at all to this point, or would have stopped at a certain point. And so, yeah, that's why I just wanted to add that here. Now, my favorite part of these revenge stories, besides from giving the utter satisfaction of seeing these horrible people getting what they deserve, because most of the time people in the real world don't, is to see the main characters thrive from being really not confident, not achieving their goals, you know, dying, to like blooming as people, personally, romantically, and in their careers. And I really love that because, for example, Giwan, she gets a new best friend. She has a better love interest husband whom she is together with, and they love each other, and he adores her, and he gives her everything that she needs, you know, in every manner of the word, basically. And then, of course, we have them also having children, and just, yeah. And then she, of course, is doing well physically. She does not have cancer. And she befriends obviously lots of other women in the office. So she has this whole friend circle, best friend, and new husband, new family, which is just so lovely. Same with Armen. He mends things with his best friend and then doesn't have this whole split up because he helps him. He and Nada help his best friend to get into culinary school, start his own like business, and so that his mom can also get medical treatments. And so I love that as well, that they not just have this romantic happy ending, but they could also mend mistakes that they've done and like rekindle friendships or find new friendships and new people that support them. For example, I love also in Reset that we have this little like glimpse of probably the secretary of Tada and the like agent manager of Armen are gonna be a couple, which I love it. Like I needed more of that. But I love a good, like, a little bit side couple. Because in Marry My Husband, we technically have two side couples. One which is confirmed, one is not confirmed. One which is the, you know, the chef, the cook, and the sister of Ji-hyuk and best friend of Gi-wan. And then we, of course, have the, like, the other two from The Office, and everyone is like, maybe they're together, but it's never 100% set, but maybe after her divorce they're gonna get together. And I feel like this kind of similar vibe in Reset, so that we have, like, we see basically that maybe they're gonna be together. So I love that everyone gets their happy ending that they deserve, basically. And that's just so lovely, and I love that, and that's why I think they are like kind of like in a similar vibe, definitely in a similar genre, similar storyline, but not just that, as I just explained, all these little minute details which do fit and mirror each other. And yeah, thank you for joining me in Fangirl Chaos Corner today, all about Marry My Husband and Reset. I'm so glad that you watched the video. I hope you enjoy it. Tell me all about it. Which is your favorite series? Did you watch both of them? Are you intrigued to watch then the other? If you haven't, just tell me all about it in the comments or also on all my social media. I'm so excited to hear from you, and we'll see each other soon. Bye!